So like, let's even use like the software is eating the world thing as an example. Like, can you tell me the story of that?
Yes, it was is me, Mark being Mark and me paying attention. Basically, we were doing a meeting with the economists. You know how they do these annual packages about some sort of tech, something or other.
Yeah.
And the reporter, wonderful reporter, Martin Giles at the time was in charge of this package or contributing to it. I don't know. And so he was asking like, so what are the big trends, right? And Mark was trying to explain that, software is becoming so important that, it is, in many fields, the dominant company ends up being a software company. And he's like, it's kind of like software's eating the world. And I'm writing this down and I'm like, Mark, that is a brilliant essay. Like, will you write it? And whatever. So then I called Ryan, I think, at the Wall Street Journal. And I said, like, if I had an essay like that for you, here's the gist. Would you run it? And he's like, absolutely. So then I told Mark, I placed it. Now please write it. And then he did. And he wrote exactly one draft.
Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm Brian McCullough. People know that a16z changed tech and especially changed venture capital by turning VCs and founders into rock stars. You know the names, but there's one name you might not know that real heads deep inside the industry have known very well over the years. The legend, Margit Vennmachers. You know all of those a16z names because of Margit, because of how she helped Marc Andreessen and Ben Horowitz and others build a16z into the most prominent VC firm in the world. This is a conversation with Margit about her entire career, her philosophy on comms and marketing and PR, and how a16z evolved. From the story behind software is eating the world to how startups can build and burnish their own legend, from the woman who, behind the scenes, those in the know, knew was making it all happen. Enjoy. Margit, thanks for finally coming on after all these years to talk to me.
Hey, Brian, it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start at the very beginning. You grew up in Western Germany, which I always kind of thought was like an industrial region, but am I right?
It has one.
You grew up on a farm. You grew up in a small
Yeah.
town on a farm.
Yeah. Our phone number, I think, at the very beginning had like 3 digits. It was really small. And it is, but like it's different from the United States. You can have a village in the United States, like we're 196 people and nothing for miles, right? So it's much more dense. But yeah, the village that I grew up in was like basically 3 streets and yeah, tiny. And it's the westernmost corner of Germany. So if you've watched Band of Brothers or any of the World War II movies, the Western Front moved right through our villages. And then my father like fled into Holland, and my mom was evacuated further into Eastern Germany, not East Germany, but like the eastern parts.
Right, because it's right on the Dutch border right there. Yep. Pig farm, was it? Or
initially mushroom, that didn't quite work out like my parents had intended it to, and then pig farm, yes. The breeding part of it, not the like fattening them up and then slaughtering them.
What did you originally go to college for?
I've not gone to college. Did you not know that?
I didn't. So, because I saw the things about you doing lots of odd jobs, like you worked in a factory and things like that. So I assumed. Yeah, go ahead.
I basically studied to be a trilingual secretary, if you can believe that, including doing like shorthand in English and German, obviously, and all of that. And then during school breaks, I would temp. And if you go to a temp agency, right, you get these secretarial jobs, but on an odd occasion, they send you into a factory. And that was really revelatory because like I put a piece of metal on a piece of machinery, I pulled down a lever and then put it into the next bin. And I did that all day. And I was like, oh my God, an office sounds nice. I want to work in an office.
So essentially what you're saying is what you went to was like trade school to essentially.
It's a fancy trade school because it's in 3 languages, but yeah.
Okay, well, that's what I misunderstood. I thought that was college, but right, you learned what languages? Obviously, German,
Oh,
English.
so in Germany, look, they're cliches for a reason, but I think foreign language instruction is a lot better in Germany. It's just totally immersion. Like my beloved daughter had 8 years of Spanish, but I don't think they were speaking a lot of Spanish. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
so I my first language was French. I did a year of Latin, which is good for the brain, but really kind of remote. And then I picked up Spanish. Oh, first language was English, then French, and then picked up Spanish at the secretary school. And then I
Wow.
spent a year in Spain to actually learn it.
Um, your mother died, I believe, in a car accident when you were about 18.
Yeah, she died in a car accident that one of my sisters and I were in, and that sort of that caused, grief is a bitch. It caused a lot of sort of early growing up, and at the same time, just sort of like I was unproductive like for at least a year. And then
Mm.
the other thing is like we didn't really have money. So I was like, I cannot afford to spend years and years and years go to college. And it was kind of painful to be at home. So I was like, I'm just gonna go to the trade school and get a job and be on my own. So that kind of catapulted me out of the house, if you will. Not quite into the US, but it definitely was a big shaping factor.
Did it did it shape how you think about major life decisions?
Yeah, there's no sort of in a situation like that, and there are other flavors of a situation like you kind of understand there is no cavalry, like there's no magic savior. You're kind of on your own, like and life, all the cliches. Life isn't fair, this, that, and the other, right? But it was really it was useful in a sick and twisted way in that it got me to go like, okay, I'm going to have to be incredibly self-reliant. I'm not going to count on anybody. Like I just need to make my own way because this could go sideways any second. So it shaped me, I think, in that way. And in some ways it gave me agency because, if you have decided like there's no help if you look around, then, it's down to you, which is kind of empowering, if you will.
Okay, you have me not trusting my research now, but I believe that you did get into tech before coming to the US because one of those
Yes.
jobs was like at a computer company still in Germany.
Yes. So one of my temp jobs was working for uh, the regions, the sales regions. They have sort of regional sales leaders, right? And the head of the German speaking region of that office was a guy called Eberhard Witte, and I was temping for him. I was
I'm sorry,
being
for what company? You didn't mention what company.
yeah, I was just getting to that. Sorry.
Oh,
The
sorry.
company was the software division of McDonnell Douglas.
Mm.
And they had sort of design software that allows you to design like airplane seats, this, that, and the other. And so I was working for him, and he knew I was going to secretary school, obviously. So he's like, well, when you're done, look me up. I did not do that because a friend and I decided that we did not learn enough Spanish to really claim that we could really properly speak Spanish. So we went to Mallorca for a year, the Balearic Island,
Hmm. Hmm.
and taught English and German to people who work in tourism, which is really amazing because I did not know how complicated German is. When you grow up with it, you just don't realize it, and how fun it could be to work with other adults and like teach them a language, something I'm very passionate about. So it was a really fun time, and then along the way, we got to learn Spanish, like proper Spanish. So when I came back from that year, we took jobs at temp agency on the way to finding a real job, right? Like a permanent job. And guess who I ran into? That same guy who now was at a different startup. And that was a startup called Ardent Computing. And that was the era, well, you're the history guy, the mini supercomputers, right? The companies that all competed with SGI, right? SGI ended up being the winner. I was working at a company called Ardent, which competed with SGI and a company called Stellar, which then merged into Stardent, which sounds like toothpaste if you really think. Anyhow, so I had that job and sort of really became curious about tech because I had never thought about tech. I'm a language person. I'm more of a social studies philosophy kind of thinker, not like a nerd thinker. But I really was enamored with the nerd culture. You had all these engineers come through because, these computers, they had their own custom chip, they had their own custom flavor of Unix, the operating system, they had their own software programs, right? And so they had software programs that allowed you to visualize complex stuff like molecules and whatnot. And so we had all these engineers come through from the US to help teach these classes, and they had written the software. And I really, really loved the curiosity, the kind of tinkerer nature, the sort of lack of judgment, and sort of the free spirit of it all. Because, you grew up in a German culture, like there are rules, like tons of them, tons and tons of them. And they tend to not be broken. Like that's not a thing. Like German culture is amazing in many, many ways, but also very conformist. And here I'm encountering this culture that's completely different, right? It's like entirely, what if we tried it this way? What if we threw out the old thing? Like what we did the new thing, right? And then I also fell in love with one of the guy who'd written the 3D software program. So that was my initial tech experience, which was a whole different world from what I grew up, and much happier, just because everybody's constantly being playful at work, if you will. Coding and figuring out how to do things, and how to solder chips and all of that. It's just making things.
We're gonna I want to talk about a culture clash here in a second when you get to Silicon Valley, but I want to point out that from the American perspective, from the 80s and 90s, the fact that you thought nerds were cool is a welcome perspective.
You weren't quite the nerds that have the pen with the pocket protector thing and the shirt, right? They were like, like picture Santa Cruz hippie CS major kind of vibe, right? Like those were the people. They were instead of not quite the characters out of *Halt and Catch Fire*, that amazing show. Have you seen it?
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so we're like a generation after that, right? Like there are no more.
You have a specific nerd type, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so. But that job, and I think that relationship is what brings you to the U.S. and specifically to the Valley.
So I got green card married because that was the easiest way to come to the U.S. and get a work permit very easily. And along the way, the company failed, as they do. And so then when I got here first, this was in 1991, I was out of work for about a year, which was very depressing because I was like, I was very eager to make my own money as referenced and all of that. But I just didn't know how to get a job in the United States. And my nerd boyfriend, husband, was not really like the networker himself. So it took me a long time. And then I got my first job as an account secretary for a team at a PR firm. So that's how, and I'd done marketing before in Europe. We left that out of the chapter. So I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I had to start again doing the admin job, but it got me to know people. And those people they're very helpful. Now the great quality that most Americans share were very helpful. And it's like, oh, go meet this person, go meet this person. And one of them left the agency and took another job. And she's like, I will help you get a job here. I'll show you how to do it, like how you do the thing. And that's how I got my first real job. And that was at an amazing agency called Blanca and Otis that was later gobbled up.
Yeah, let me slow down a second. Culture shock, as I mentioned, coming from Germany to the US, just full stop, culture shock's going to happen. But then you're describing the Silicon Valley culture, which is maybe a little freer and try this, try that, versus what you were used to.
Yeah, look, the first place that we went to where my green card husband was he lived in Santa Cruz. So that's how you get this weird, like it's a very specific subculture, I think. And I got up and I went to a coffee place called Pergolazi's, and I had like my nylons on, my skirt, the whole thing. And this guy with blonde dreadlocks walks up to me. He's like, do you want to go to the beach and get high? And I was like, this is not going to work. I was like, it's like I took a lot of loosening up on my end and, also meeting the not Santa Cruz quotient of Silicon Valley. It was really hysterically funny in the beginning.
I quote Marc Andreessen in my book saying famously, when he got to the Valley around this time, he thought that it was dead and over, that the PC boom had happened, but the web hadn't really happened yet. So
Yeah.
can you give me a sense of what you felt like the Valley was in terms of like the energy in
Yeah.
those days?
Look, there was a mini recession. I forget what caused it, but there was a mini recession. So the job market was pretty frozen. When I finally got the job, the agency at the time had like a really solid list of clients, and they were like Quantum, the hard drive,
Mm-hmm.
Novell, the
Mm-hmm.
networking software, right? Like Sun Microsystems was still like booming, right? And Informix, I think, right? So that was sort of the tech set of its time. But you're right, we hadn't found our next thing yet, right? Like high tech, just as we all know, it happens in waves. We're experiencing a massive wave right now, but like, there's always a lull before you get to the next wave, right? Like, and then the web came along, right? I think Netscape went public in 1994, which kind of made it 95, sorry, which made it official, right? And in 1997, my co-founder and I started Outcast Communications, right? Because it was just like there was just this massive, there was a glut of startups, right? Everything was being tried out, like e-commerce, pets.com, all the things, right? So it was a great time to start a business because we just were entering a big boom.
Right. So you happen to be at the right place at the right time, and you're seeing through Blank Notice, getting these connections to the tech industry. But is the inspiration to start Outcast, your firm, that, well, Blank Notice is maybe too big and too slow. We need to go after these younger companies, these startups, and we can do it
No, it
ourselves?
was not that. Blanca Notice was great. I had a great client list. They had a really rough moment when they lost Sybase, which at the time was 60% of their business, but like we replaced the business, like it was all fine. It was a really great firm, run by two great women. It was more that I was like, oh, one can do this. They did it. Like Simone, I think was 25 when she started. It's like, why don't we do this? Right. It wasn't out of frustration. It was more like, we can do this. And I think if we get our first client, we're going to be okay because anyhow, like we just like, and it doesn't cost anything, like I bought a laptop and a printer. so, so yeah, no, it's more of an inspiration as a running away from.
And your co-founder was Karen Maroney.
Karen Maroney.
Uh, yeah. Whose idea was it? Did you talk her into it? Did she talk
So
you?
I approached her and she approached Ben by someone else, which I didn't know. So eventually she settled like, okay, she and I were going to do this. And it was a great partnership. I think we were very different, very complementary, like, but the same level of determined and hardworking. So I think in a people partnership, it's just really hard if you have big gulfs between like either work ethic or determination or any of those qualities that you need to really get something out of nothing going. So yeah, it worked great.
The name of the firm was Outcast, which I wish you had done with a K, like the rap duo. But I also think that you were definitely sort of framing what you wanted to be by choosing that name. So
Yeah, so we actually, green card husband came up with that. He's like, what about Outcast? It's like casting out this, and he had a whole theory, right? And we're like, we went to a conference. Do you remember the demo conference?
yeah.
That was a little bit like you have to pay your 12,000 grand to be on stage. It was whatever, dubious business model, but I love Chris and it was a fun conference. So we tried it out on reporters and they all liked it because it's always so stuffy when it has their names on the door and like also with my name and her last name, not like it's just like a non-starter. But they just like it's memorable and it doesn't sound like you take yourselves too seriously. So they liked it. It was like, well, that's the main audience, really. So they liked it, and so we stuck with it. And I think it's still great.
You're, as you mentioned, you bought a printer. You're working like off your kitchen table, etc. And it is boom times, and you have experience with tech, so you've got a Rolodex, etc. But like, tell me the story of like landing that first client and then knowing, okay, we can do this.
So the first client was a guy I would be forever grateful to. His name is Sharam Sasson. He was one of the Sasson brothers. I don't know if you've heard of them. Um, Jewish Iranian. He was sent off to London with his three younger brothers, I think, to go to school and escape, anti-Semitism, topic that we keep having to deal with, clearly. And then they went to the United States. I think they all got engineering degrees, and they had started a couple of companies. And then Taram started a company called Extensity, which was, don't yawn, it was an expense report management company, one of those pieces of software that you have to fill out when you go to business.
Sexy, yes.
Yeah, really sexy. So, but I've got a good comeback for that. So, he had called Blanca Notice, the agency, and we had already quit, but we're still there unwinding client work and whatnot. And Blanca Notice had a conflict with a company. I think it was Ariba at the time. Remember Ariba software?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one I know.
And so we asked Simone whether we should have permission to pitch the client for ourselves. And she graciously said yes, like, I can't take them, so go for it. And we had quit, like there was no unwinding that. So basically our pitch to Sharam was like, listen, look, we've got this experience, but bottom line is we cannot fail with you, because if we fail with you and you let us go, we don't have a business. Like, that's it. Like, it's cradle to grave, like in one go. And I thought he thought that was a compelling pitch. And so he took us on. And then Touchline was on the board of Extensity, and Extensity was part of the Java fund. Remember when Kleiner used to set aside pockets of money on dedicated to specific technologies, right? Which has kind of had comic, although a fund is kind of a bit contorted. Anyhow, they had the Java fund. And Extensity was the first, and for a while only, enterprise software Java company. So Sun was interested in them succeeding, and Kleiner was interested in them succeeding because, they had a whole 50 million, 300, I forget. But anyhow, so Touchline sat us down and we're like, oh my God, this Touchline, Kleiner Perkins, this and that and the other. And he's like, this needs to be a big success. And I want a press conference. And it's always kind of like, do you really want to dictate the tactics? But it wasn't a terrible idea if we could make it interesting, right? So we asked Ted, like, okay, get us John Doerr to host the whole thing, and get us Scott McNeely to do like something funny, because Scott McNeely was hysterically funny, if you remember. And Ted's like, okay. And he got us both. And then John did a gracious opener, enterprise software company, this, that, and the other. And John is an incredible salesman, right? Like, he is just so good at it. And then Scott McNeely did one of those top 10 lists that Dave Letterman used to do.
Right, yeah.
How Microsoft couldn't ever be bothered with doing something like that for a small company, blah, 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 blah. It was all about Microsoft, because he had this major grudge against Microsoft. So that was our first press conference. And the very boring expense reporting software got a write-up in Wired, where Wired wrote, well, we would have never gone to this press conference had it not been for, John Doerr and Scott McNeely. And so they bother. So I guess we have to even write about boring expense reporting software. And we're like, that's a win. Anyhow, that was our first. Ta-da.
Hey everybody, this is Brian cutting in here real quick. If you like the deep dives into tech history that I do on this show, you should know about my day jobs. First of all, I'm the host of the Tech Brew Ride Home podcast, part of the Morning Brew family. Every day, in 15 minutes on that show, I tell you what happened that day in the world of tech. For almost a decade, it's like I'm telling you the tech history that is happening in real time. I'd love you to check it out, because that show allows me to do this show. Search Tech Brew Ride Home in your podcast app of choice. But also, I have a rolling fund, the Ride Home Fund. We invest in early stage startups, have made dozens and dozens of investments over the years. So if you're an accredited investor, you can invest alongside me in the companies making the tech history of the future. You can find out more and sign up to invest alongside me at ridehomefund.com. We're going to talk a lot about your philosophy around comms and PR and marketing in general. But so Outkast is that for startups in the .com era. It lasts beyond the .com era. But so what is your pitch in those days to a startup? Is it that, man, there's this gold rush happening and we can help you stand out?
So at the time, everybody was very obsessed with launches. Do you remember? I mean, I don't know how old you are, but like you must have attended these launch parties, right? And like for some reason, like the world had decided we have to have a launch party, right? It's sort of like CEOs all of a sudden wanting to disclose their valuation. It's sort of a mark of success of some sort. Anyhow, so we did a lot of those, but like essentially our pitch was very custom. So I can't really remember how we pitched, so and so versus so and so, but it was like, look, you're young, nobody knows you yet. Like we are connected to the reporters that will shape opinion about, and by the way, this is before everyone went direct, right? Which I think,
Right.
started at
Right.
Andreessen Horowitz,
Oh,
right?
we'll
But
get there. We'll
it
get
was
there.
very much your reputation or your very existence was kind of dependent on somebody writing about you and then writing about you in a specific way. And then we made a decision from day one that I've never regretted. I think that served us well, that we were going to treat reporters and analysts just like clients. Because if the reporter doesn't get anything out of it, like you do that 3 times, then why would a reporter ever care, right? So we needed to be able to go like, okay, what is the story, Mr. or Mrs. Startup, right? Like how is this interesting? And then we explain like, look, if you want to have a profile in Fortune, right? Like read a profile in Fortune, we show them examples. Like these are the kind of column inches that we need to fill, right? So let's make a story. And if we didn't feel like we could tell a compelling story, we didn't take the client. We said no to many more clients than we had. And as a result, I think there were a lot of reporters who would just take the meeting because they had enough trust in us that there was like, it's not going to be a waste of my time. I might not write about it because of whatever, but like, it's not going to be a total waste of time. And that really, really worked. Sort of they're all first-class citizens.
Well, being choosy and picky, you're saying worked. Let me ask you a philosophical question about, like startups are like essentially in the game of fake it till you make it. So comms for a startup, what is your, okay, you might disagree, but what is your philosophy around telling the truth of a product of a startup versus chasing headlines, like when credibility is what you're just saying is your most important asset?
Yeah. So look, I actually think there is a difference. Like there are companies that actually fake it and never make it, and there are companies that tell a grand story, but the reality is kind of here. I'm okay with that. I think like if you're going to attract people to want to work for you, right, and leave the cushy job at Microsoft, right, and instead go for a startup, whatever, you have to be able to explain a vision that makes a dent in the universe, right? If you cannot do that, nobody is going to want to follow you. Forget reporters writing about you. So I'm like okay with the vision being pretty lofty and like something that you grow into. I'm not okay with like faking the product, right? Like, but like what I like to do with clients is, here, what's the big vision? Like how, 10, 20 years from now, right? Like how are things going to be better, right? And then show me the milestones along the way. We are here today, right? On this journey of like fabulousness, right? And like here we are today. This is the beta, this is the this is the this. Because when it comes to actual product, customers get annoyed, when you have a feature list, it's just not real. But vision should be massive because otherwise you're not going to get anything from 0 to 1 unless you get people fired up about something that's bigger than themselves, that's bigger than their day job, that's bigger than the foosball table at Google, right? It has to have more than that.
Can I ask you about a couple of clients from this era? Is Salesforce your big get from this time?
Yeah, so that was mostly Karen's baby. Karen and Marc had a really great relationship. And that was, so I think between Salesforce and VMware, we had sort of the two enterprise software franchises, right? And Diane is still a good friend. She's amazingly talented. And that was a very hard business to pull off. So like we had those. And then on the consumer side, we had like, I think at the time, Yahoo, the Amazon Kindle we launched. Did work for AWS, like so a really good client. And I think that's the trick. Like a lot of heads of PR firms will tell you if you hire good people, the rest will happen. That's horseshit. You have to have good clients that people want to work on. And like we would get resumes for people and say like, I want to work on the Salesforce account. And we're like, no. Like go there if you know, you need to actually want to work at Outcast. But they would want to work because they knew they didn't have to sell shit that we knew was all crap, right? And they were going to join a firm that was always going to be very good at picking clients where there's an actual story to tell. Did we get it wrong every time? No, but most of the time we did.
I'm getting a little bit out of chronology here, but I'm going to squeeze this in. Landing Facebook as a client, how early was Facebook when you started working with them?
That was a tough one. And like we had like a heart palpitations about it because Yahoo viewed them as a competitor. But then
right, because Yahoo was a client of you. Yeah.
Yes, Yahoo is a very massive client, and the account team was really happy working with Yahoo. So it was. But Karen pointed out, and I think she was right. It's like, you know, Facebook is just too good an opportunity to not pursue. So I basically went to Yahoo and met with my client Joanna, and it's like, listen, we're going to take on Facebook, and we hope that we get to keep you. We actually don't think it's a conflict. We also will have completely different teams, but like it was more like, I hope you understand versus you get to veto this.
How big was Facebook?
In revenue, I cannot remember any of these numbers.
But like 100 people, or they were bigger than that at that point?
Well, how big was Facebook?
Yeah.
Facebook had moved on from the universities to the mainstream.
Okay.
So it was kind of there.
They were,
and it was hair on fire the entire, like Brandy Barker did an amazing job, and it was like hair on fire every moment of every day. It's just like growing like a weed.
I want to finish up with Outcast, but tell me about the bubble bursting, because again, you're in an industry where your clients will go away. You know first that things are turning because clients stop returning your calls.
And I think it's also psychologically when people get jittery, they're like, okay, at least we're going to stop all of that, right? And it's the easiest thing to cut, you know, because it's not engineering, it's whatnot. We went to this other conference that doesn't exist anymore that was excellent called PC Forum. Do you remember this one?
No.
Esther Dyson's conference.
Oh, I'm talking to her on Wednesday.
I was going to say you should definitely have her on the program. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she ran a really very intellectual, like very cool conference, and they would pick actual products that they believed in, not for pay and all of that. It was a great conference. We lost 5 clients on the day of that conference, and they all called, so like, look, we have no issue with you. We just cannot spend any money. And it's just like, the way we managed through it is because we wanted to preserve what was the essence of Outcast, which was like, you can count on us to have good clients. They're going to be interesting. They may not make it all the way, but so we cut enough jobs to preserve the ability to say no to a client. Because once you get and you have to take on anybody who breathes, even though you don't think there's a story there, their reporter will actually want to be interested in it at all. So we made really deep cuts, and we did it once. And there were agencies in our cohort that did like 7 cuts, and you can imagine like nobody can work productively when all you wait for is like the next email, right, about the next cut. So that's how we managed through it, but it was not fun. It was not fun. Layoffs are not fun. I've now had to do them a few times, and I've had to help our portfolio companies. So now I'm kind of hard-nosed about it, but like they're not fun.
But you had confidence this is cyclical. The internet's not going away. There will be a new era of tech. You were all in, and you just had to write it out.
Yeah, no, I've never believed in that, you know, tech is bad or like it's all over. We have invented everything. I've just never believed that. And it's the problem in our business where you get paid monthly, right? Like you just don't have the time horizon that you have at a venture capital firm. We can just like sit out the markets and this and that, right? Clients react to that, and then you feel the consequences. The world doesn't know how to go like, okay, the web is happening. Turns out like all of the ideas were good, from pets.com to everything, right? But like they were just too early. There weren't enough people on the internet, and they were on dial-up and all of that. But it was like those were solvable problems, right? And actually it does help spending so much time with engineers, because when you explain to an engineer, we're like, what about this? What about this? They basically make a mental list of like the stuff that needs fixing, right? And so that's in their head, but it's impossible to time. And so occasionally you have to let people go because clients are going away.
So Outcast is eventually acquired, and I want to ask you this because this is my chance to ask you this from the founder perspective, right?
Yeah.
What made you comfortable selling? Like, what were the non-price terms that mattered most to you, and were like, let's do this?
So again, preserving the core, like excellent clients, excellent relationships, like good stories. And so the offers that we had gotten leading up to it is like they looked at me, oh, Europe, right? And they're like, oh, you sell the client base sell our agency, our offices to your clients, right? And you should go to Asia because, that's left over, right? And they were always about them wanting to maximize revenue. And I get that. They're businesses, that's what they should do. We wanted to maximize for like excellence. We had the reputational goal. And we also felt like comfortably that if you achieve that, you will have the margins and all of that. So those offers weren't attractive to us. And then Tim Dyson from Next 15 comes along and he's like, well, I just want to own a portfolio of firms so that, basically I don't ever have a conflict issue. There's always a good agency that blah, 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 blah. And so we didn't have to change a thing other than we had to integrate into the spreadsheets and, that kind of bullshit. But like that worked fine. And then that was a way for us to avoid like being so clobbered with the cyclical stuff, right? Like we each had a bit of a personal nest egg, right? And like I had never had anything like that, right? So that was nice. And we didn't really have to change how we operated. So that was a good partner for us. I'm not saying the other agencies are bad. They just had a different goal.
Okay, A16Z. Now, the founding story of A16Z, Marc and Ben have discussed it in several places, but I'm going to ask you because one of the things I've learned about doing history is even the people themselves, sometimes the story. I'm curious to hear your version that you've heard over the years of how Marc and Ben decided they wanted to do a VC firm.
So they decided that before I met them. They had already decided that they were going to do it. I met them and they never even told me why they were meeting me. I was under the assumption since Marc grilled me for an hour, Ben said nothing, and then they said thank you and nothing else, no context. I thought like, oh, maybe they want to be able to refer an agency for their angel investing that they're doing, right? Marc had been doing some angel investing. He was on the board of Facebook. And then Ben had just sold Opsware to HP.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that's what they were doing. And then a few months later, they sat me down and then just like, listen, between us, we want to start a venture capital firm. We want to raise $300 million. And this was a really tough time. This was the height of the liquidity crisis after the mortgage scandal, right? Like it was just
Great recession. Yeah.
Not a lot of dollars floating around. It was like the two of you, 300 million. Marc just said, let's assume success. And so they wanted Outkast, me, to launch the thing. And Marc had a good relationship with Charlie Rose. Remember, he had that famous interview show. I think it's back, right? I'm not quite sure. I should look into that. But anyhow, and so Marc had a bit of an open invitation. So the thought was, okay, Marc goes on Charlie Rose, and at the very end, just sort of, by the way, I'm gonna, go quiet now because we're gonna, start a venture capital firm. And you cannot do anything while you're raising money, right? Because that's viewed as solicitation. And then I sort of negotiated a couple of possible cover stories. One was Business Week when it was called Business Week still, and one was with Fortune. So we had a choice, and then it came down to, I guess, the writer and like timelines and all of that. So we worked with Kevin Maney to do the Fortune cover story to launch the firm, and that was that.
So essentially, at first, A16Z is a client.
Yes. They were a client for about a year, something like. So a couple of things happened at the same time, right? Our earnout was done with Next 15. When you sell a services firm, you have an earnout because mostly it tends to be very dependent on the founders, right? And so that earnout was done. And then, you don't get the extra payment anymore, which is the money due to you for the sale. And they became a client. And so about a year and a half in, Ben had kind of messed up something. Like he did something that we were never going to do in public. So I called him, you can't do that. And he's like, I can totally do that. I'm like, well, you shouldn't, whatever. And then I think Marc had the idea that it might be so useful that I should just join full time. And then the reason I did it was, back in the day, you'll probably remember this, the list of the top 4 or 5 firms, it was basically etched in stone. It just did not change. So how were we going to break into that top 5 bucket? And like, that's where all the interesting deal happens. So if you're a venture capital firm and you just don't see the deals, like there's 3 things, right? There's see the deals, pick the deals, and win the deals. If you don't see them, like 2 and 3 cannot happen. You know what I mean? As good as you are at it. So somehow we had to break into the top 5 consideration. And like, that was an interesting marketing challenge, right? That's why I thought it was worth doing.
I did see a quote. I saw a quote from Marc that said you were the hardest hire, that maybe you took some convincing.
Look, this is the thing. Like, when you go from founder mode to I am now not a founder, that's not a particularly pleasant feeling. You know what I mean? And like, full and well, it's like, okay, at the end of the day, you're making the decisions on the brand and all of that, but you're not making all the decisions, right? It's just a different feeling, right? But I got over it because like I had enough game film. I'd spent enough time with them on the road and in meetings and this and that I thought that they actually did have the ambition, and they also had the work ethic to actually pull it off, right? So I was like, okay. And then, yeah, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But, I also wasn't going to stay at Outcast forever because, like, look, that's my non-human child. I love it. I will always love it. But, like, I didn't know how to do it. Like, once you've done something for 14 years, if you're still struggling to do it, you know what I mean? And then eventually, if you do the same thing over and over again, insert different names, it's just like, it's time for a change, right? So I joined.
All right. So to frame this, if a16z is going to succeed, you have to break into the top 5. And so you're thinking we've got to do something different. Now, historically, as you're saying, like, there's a reason why people would say, well, you have to go to Sand Hill Road to raise money. It's like you had to go to the mountain. The mountain did not come to you, right? So given that, I feel like, at least initially or by his nature, Marc is not necessarily one that's like, well, I'm going to go out and sell myself. How did you, as a firm, settle on this idea of where VC used to be quiet behind the scenes, the wizards behind where it's like you put the VC forward as personalities?
Well, so the thing is, if you're going to market a firm, like, all you have is people and ideas. Like, there's no product. I mean, the least interesting thing we do is going like, okay, now we've raised X billion dollars. Like, yeah, that's the oxygen that we need, but that's not the like that's one sentence in a story, if you will, right? So, but if you notice, we were very careful around it. Like, I've always told people, like, look, if you ask Marc, like, how great, if you ask him to tell you how great he is and this and that, he'll just completely shut down. It's sort of the Midwestern in him that just doesn't work. But the good news is you can ask the man just about anything in tech, and then a lot of other things, right? Like, he really does have ideas, right? It's and
history,
so, and the thing,
yeah, all sorts of stuff.
And the thing that we also decided is like, okay, so when you market, like, who do you market to? And we decided, like, look, the LPs are people with phone numbers, and there's a finite list, and we know how to reach them thanks to some fellow VCs who made introductions for Ben and Marc, which was incredibly generous. I think Jim Breyer was one of those who just really, like, shared his Rolodex, right? But we wanted to market to the entrepreneurs, because if again, the top deals, right, go to a very small number of firms. And like, there, we actually had really good credentials. Marc had co-created the browser. I mean, oh my God, right? Like, that's
right.
a pretty good credential. And then Ben had that CEO credential, right? He had actually gone from product manager to CEO. He had turned LoudCloud into a company worth $1.6 billion or $1.3 billion or something like that after death, right? So there, they had excellent credentials. So what we talked about from day one is like company building, right? Like, or, what's the market like today? What do we think about, the iPhone versus Android, whatever it is, right? Like, and that we talked about. And I think that was very, the feedback we got, and this is where also the going direct became so valuable, because entrepreneurs would come into the pitch room And they would say, like, you know what's really interesting about you guys? I kind of have a feeling I know who I'm meeting with, even though I've never seen you before, but like I know what's in your head, and then and that worked so spectacularly well that then every time a GP came in and interviewed, like it was by the law, you will have a brand, right? And then it was up to us, the team, to figure out, like, okay, what are this person's thoughts? What is this person good at in terms of like delivery? Is this a TED Talk person, or is this a slide deck person? Is this a podcaster? Is this someone who's excellent on Twitter? And match the two into a plan that works for said GP. And then they attract the deal flow that they're looking for, right? Like if you want to invest in crypto, then, Chris Dixon has written the book on it. And obviously a lot more.
In a similar vein, when we were coming up, rock stars were rock stars. If you wanted to get rich, maybe you were an athlete or you go to Wall Street or whatever. I feel like what you're saying is the lesson is also, what have we got? We've got the personalities behind our startups. So I give
look,
you all.
This is new-ish, but you are no longer able to just run the company behind the scenes. Like, just really stupid little things like the a16z Twitter X account, sorry, right? It's just not as compelling as Marc's thoughts. That's just a thing, right? So, you see the candidate for mayor of New York, right? Like, excellent on social media. Like, I don't know if that's how we should choose our politicians or not, but like that's a fact. It's how Kennedy was the first president made for TV, and like this, that, and the other. We're in one of those, and it now includes CEOs simply because or tech people. Tech has become a power center, and like when we were like nerdy people who couldn't make eye contact, who were somewhere in Silicon Valley, like in Sleepy Hills, like tinkering and soldering and all that, that was all fine. Like the entertainment people and the politicians and the Wall Street people had no problem with that, right? But now we are on equal or upper footing as software is eating the world. We all remember the essay, right? And that just makes people scrutinize us more. That is deserved in many ways, but it also puts a bit of a target on our backs. And in this new era, it is the CEO or whoever, like the constellation of spokespeople who are front and center of that. And that's just like, it comes with the job. If you don't like it, then don't be CEO. It's just like, it just is.
Hey, we skipped over something important, which is that when you join a16z, you join as an operating partner.
Yes.
Right? You're not like an employee, you're a partner. And you've made investments there over the years, right?
So I'm not the major check writer at
Right.
the firm at all. I've done some personal investing, which I enjoy a great deal, and I'll probably do some more now that I have more time. But yeah, I've sat in like countless pitches, and I could almost always anticipate what the conclusion was or who was going to react how to what. It's really funny. There's a lot of, people, when you tell people you work in finance, people just kind of yawn and they think you, like, it's all people. It's people and ideas, and it's pitching, and it's winning an argument, and it's inspiring people. It's all the things. It's like drama, essentially, with an occasional comedy thrown in.
You're saying you're in all these meetings, so even if you're not, making the decision or signing the check or whatever, they gave you influence, or they put you at a seat at the table for not only how the firm evolves, but like what the firm is investing in and strategy and startups and things.
I would look at it differently. So what they did that really matters in partnerships, and I've said this to countless of my peers at other firms, they gave me the mandate. When it comes to brands, like the content, all the stuff, press, this and that, like, we're going to follow your lead. Because what happens is, in a partnership, like if you're in my job and you have to run everything by every partner, then somebody raises a concern, then it becomes risky to be the one who has voted for it. I've seen that. Like, I've had reporters call me with countless stories. I'm like, I'm going to write a story about firm X. How's it going to go? And I'm like, they're going to say, no, because somebody is afraid, this and the other. You're going to write it anyways, and they're going to be unhappy. And then, like, they always go like that. So I got a mandate to go like, oh, anything that we do, any event, any whatever, like what it looks like. And yeah, can I weigh in on pitch? I mean, I haven't done it in a long time because we're so big now. But yeah, can I do that? But that wasn't my job. And then the operating partner bit is important because, well, you are also an LP, right? So there's economics associated with that. But like you just have higher standing. And I don't like to think in terms of hierarchies. I like to think that, I treat people the same no matter what. But anyhow, yeah, that was a useful thing. And I think many firms have followed that, which I'm very excited about. Because
About
we just had a going away party of my WhatsApp group, which is all the people who have sort of some equivalent of my job. And we had a blast.
talk talk about the day to day of your job. Specifically, I want to ask you to tell us about the 4B code.
Before what?
4B code. I read an
Oh,
article
4B.
that
Yeah, I
yeah.
think 4B is now a thing in Korea. We're gonna have to call it 4C or something like that. So, so yeah, there's a lot of look, I wake up and then I have my meetings and then something blows up and then the meetings have to go and have to be moved because there's a lot of unpredictability because once you have a portfolio that has several hundred companies in it, right? Like there's always something happening that's going sideways. So years back, I have no idea. It must be 10 years ago. I wrote sort of a generic crisis plan, which kind of described the culture you should have, towards vis-a-vis a crisis, the teams that are always involved, the teams that plug in, depending whether it's product or legal or whatnot, and then just the attitude that you want to embrace the people who raise the red flag, not penalize them because then everything gets driven underground, right? And then every person who sort of every person on this core team gets to invoke a 4C, and then we kind of drop everything and we get on the phone, we start sorting things out, and just having a framework for that. And also it allows us to help other firms, other companies in our portfolio to adopt a similar framework, right? Just taking them through it. And we've seen a lot. At one point I had a slide. We used to do a thing called a reverse pitch, where it's like, well, here's what happens when you take our money, right? Or if you take our money, right? And one of the things that the marketing team does is like when there's a crisis, we scrub in. And then we had a slide with all the different flavors of crises, and then people just started to get petrified, So like there's too much of a bummer of a slide, so we took it out. But yeah, we've seen everything.
Well, crises are inevitable, especially over the life of a company. If there's a founder listening or a CEO listening right now, what is your advice, say, in the first 60 minutes of a crisis happening? Or what's just your general philosophy for the crisis has hit? What do you do first? So
first you assemble the right team. Like who needs to help solve the problem, right? Like it's usually, so if it's a personnel issue, it's always HR and it's always legal, right? And then it's always comms because you don't want to see in the Wall Street Journal or New York Times, right? So then you'll get advice on how to try and avoid that, right? Like, so it's always like assemble the core team, then really try to get to the bottom of the issue is, and then figure out like, okay, what's the shelf life of this? If this is a protracted legal battle, you got to suit up, and then you have to figure out, okay, what other content can come out from the company so that all the Google searches aren't legal. But the activities, there's so many. I will say a crisis is really an opportunity, at minimum, to make the company better. So if somebody, whoever it was, like fucked something up, this is an opportunity to make the company better, right? Like that's just a fact of life. So don't try to hide and don't try to not see what the opportunity is in. So one famous one, Airbnb, right? Like somebody like rented a San Francisco apartment and they did the drug party, right? And like destroyed the place, right? The crisis team, I was not in there, but it was happened at a board meeting, and Brian Chesky had this idea. It's like, we'll just do, we'll have a safety deposit of like $500, right? And Marc said like, add 2 zeros. And like, that's taking the opportunity of it all, right? So like, oh, you have just kind of sort of digitized trust, right? Where I really feel like I have recourse. And $500 wasn't going to do that. Not that it's a bad idea, but like that, see the opportunity to either send a signal to the employees that that's not okay, see the opportunity in how to make customer service better, like all of it.
Well, and in that case, in the Airbnb case, the opportunity was to say to the host that, hey, we're taking this so seriously that we're not going to nickel and dime you when something goes wrong. We're going to have your back, right?
We're not going to go and ask for your $12 IKEA receipt. Like there's actual research. If somebody really like fucks up your department, excuse my French, right? Like we will not ditch you.
Let's talk about the going direct, and we've been talking about it initially sort of like as that was a superpower or a tool used to get deal flow or to convince people to sign up with A16Z in terms of founders. But I also feel like what you all have done over the years is like technology is completely transforming our life over the last 25 years. And you have felt like, well, we can explain what is happening to you. We can tell you the people who have made this happen. So like, let's even use like the software is eating the world thing as an example. Like, can you tell me the story of that? Like when you heard about that, and then pitch it to like the Wall Street Journal.
Yes, it was me, Marc being Marc and me paying attention. Basically, we were doing a meeting with the Economist. You know how they do these annual packages about some sort of tech, something or other.
Yeah.
And the reporter, wonderful reporter, Martin Giles at the time, was in charge of this package or contributing to it. I don't know. And so he was asking like, so what are the big trends, right? And Marc was trying to explain that, software is becoming so important that, it is, in many fields, the dominant company ends up being a software company. And he's like, it's kind of like software's eating the world. And I'm writing this down and I'm like, Marc, that is a brilliant essay. Like, will you write it? And whatever. So then I called Ryan, I think, at the Wall Street Journal. And I said, like, if I had an essay like that for you, here's the gist. Would you run it? And he's like, absolutely. So then I told Marc, I placed it. Now please write it. And then he did. And he wrote exactly one draft.
That's I feel like that's become so canonical in the sense that, again, if you're feeling like we need to explain to people how tech is changing their lives,
right.
That was like a bumper sticker like thing that like summed up like entire trends and things like that. So
it rarely happens that a simple, few words, right, express something truly profound. And this is the case, I think, with software is eating the world. Like you could write an entire book about how software is eating the world, right? And not run out of material, right? It's just, and then it's pithy, right? So it was just genius.
Is that something, again, for people listening, maybe people in comms, like you obviously can't hit a grand slam like that every time, but is there a lesson there where pithy, as dumb as it sounds, pejorative as it sounds, bumper sticker, sometimes that's what you need to aim for to get your message across?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've a lot of companies. I'm working with a company right now that is trying to get exactly to like, we are X, right? And I do think, nobody's going to just land a software is eating the world memo on schedule. That's just not a thing, right? One, the trend has to happen, right? And then two, you have to be able to describe it. But I do think having a proper like description of what you do that is understandable to, like, say, bankers on Wall Street, right, can make the company so much more valuable. And it is a somewhat painful exercise to sit in a room and brainstorm this stuff, but I do actually believe it's worth doing because anything from hiring, like recruiting, employee, like, does everybody know what we do? Like really, and can explain it at various levels. Like I used to call that a message card. We used to, at Outcast, that was one of the products we sold essentially, which is sort of a workshop where we come up with this. And then we would have a message card that I like laminate. And people go like, okay, here's what we do at that level, and a deeper level, at a level like that, at a level targeted at so and so. And those were all fun and intense exercises. I liked it. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think so. to try to bring this to a landing, what have you learned from the 20 years of working with Marc and Ben specifically?
Aim higher. Like that's a big one. Fear not allowed. Another big one. And like really, this is for Marc in particular, just staying curious. Like he does, he stays curious in both in both directions, past and future. So there's nothing that he hasn't written about internet history and this, that, and a lot of other history, Wall Street history, this, that, and the other. And then obviously he always has one foot in the future and likes to spend time with young people just because they keep us all, hopefully their youth rubs off on us.
I know Marc wrote the software's eating the world thing, but we've gotten through a whole hour and barely talked about AI. If you had to write a similar thesis headline for where you think tech is headed right now, we can't get the bumper sticker because we're not that good, but like, what would you say you see the direction of the tech industry right now?
I mean, to me, this is the sort of on the magnitude of like another printing press or the web. I've never seen anything like this, and I've been around for a good long time now. Like I started in the late 80s, but like this is massive. And I would just caution, like, genies do not go back in the bottle. So all the people who are just sitting here discussing whether we should move forward or not, that's just not a thing. That's not on the menu. That's not a choice, right? It's happening. And it's usually up to the people to get it right. Like same as fire, fire is a very, very important technology. If I burn down your house, I'm committing a crime. So let's just make sure we keep the pressure on the people to use it properly and to get to the cancer advances that we're all dying to get to, right? And use it in productive ways. And I do think, and like maybe this is where I'm too patriotic, but like I do think I'd rather have the United States take the lead than any other spot on earth. So I do think it's important that we quote unquote win this race. That's a big one.
Okay, we're talking, Margit, because you announced that you're graduating to partner emeritus status, and I said, okay, now you can finally talk to me. So what is your current status? Like, what is your role at a16z today or like for the next few years?
So I'm currently, as of August 15th, I'm consulting. And I wanted to do that because there's some longstanding relationships and there's some like 4Cs that are brewing. So I just don't want to ditch those people right in the middle. I'm not going to do it forever. So my plan is to do that for 6 months. And then everybody who's sort of graduating, like who's been in a similar position, they all tell me I have to take at least a year off. If not, I'll make a mistake. So I'm pondering that. I'm both excited about experiencing like no meetings. What is that like? I mean, literally, Brian, I have worked in some way, shape, or form every day since I was 23 years old. Not all day, you know what I mean? And yes, I've been on vacation, but like there's always something. There's like, I've never not had my phone on, blah, blah, blah. So that'd be kind of interesting. And it's also a little petrifying. I'm doing 2 little trips that I've promised myself. One is booked, the other one is to be booked. I'm going to go to France to do immersion French, to brush up my French. I'm going to do the same in Spain. I'm ideally in Mallorca, so I'm looking for that. And then I want to do something else. I think I'm happier when I'm doing something from nothing versus like a giant organization where you're pushing buttons and turning knobs and fine tuning things. So I don't know, but I'll probably come ask you for your advice at some point.
I'm going to pitch you on something.
Great.
I feel like you maybe more than anybody knows where all the bodies have been buried in Silicon Valley over the last 25 years. So
no book.
No book? Oh man. Well, then we're
my
gonna
line of work. Like,
well, then you would never be able to work again.
Me not writing a book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. Well, then we will have to have coffee sometime soon.
I mean, that would be very fun for me. And I was like, oh, look how great I am and what I've seen. But like, it would remind a series of my friends of their worst times they've ever had. And that's just kind of like, do I want to do that? Nah, I think I'd rather build something new.
All right. Well, then, like I said, save it for me in person. Give me a couple of bodies buried. But would you consider doing VC yourself? I mean, you say you angel invest.
Yes, I would. Look, the one thing I don't want, the thing that was good about going from Outcast to Andreessen Horowitz, those were different industries. Like I could leverage some of my skill set, not all of it, right? But what I don't want is I don't want the same job that I've just done for 15, 16 years, right? So something, and running something again would be really enjoyable since I've done that at Outcast, right? And I was more sort of the person who was doing that. So something that combines sort of my skills and interests, I think. Definitely, I don't anticipate leaving tech. I can't imagine that.
Margit, thank you so much for sitting down and remembering all that with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I really enjoy the Internet History podcast. There's so many young folks who I think like benefit or would benefit if they're not listening yet. So it's a great product that you've got there.